Everyone, it's Michael, and today I'm going to attempt to break down a very complex subject as simply as I possibly can, and that is the matter of nutrient deficiency. Now, fair warning, I do not claim to be an expert in this realm. In fact, I am just becoming more familiar with the struggle and figuring out some really proactive solutions. Having said that, I would really encourage you to spend some time with Rick L's Orchid channel. He is the master of all things nutrient related. In fact, a lot of the solutions that I plan to implement are borrowed directly from him. So he can offer a lot more insight than I can on this matter. I just want to walk you through my unique experience and what exactly is happening with my plants. So just to jump in, I want to show you what has recently developed with a lot of my plants, specifically a lot of my Cattleya types. Now there are three real categories here. We have blackening leaf tips on new growths, which you see here, but we also have the matter of this weird mottling, this marbling that happens on the leaves, which is, you can see, it's almost as if the chlorophyll ceases to function, so the plant becomes kind of yellowy and marbled, and that eventually progresses into some dark spots. And that's not just happening with my Cattleya types, that's also happening with my epidendrum here, it's happening with my Maxillaria tenuifolia, it's happening with a variety of my plants. And the last category that I'm really trying to highlight here is bud blast and the aborting of flower spikes. And you can see that happening with just a few of the buds here, but this entire flower spike on my cymbidium completely aborted. And that's compounded with the blackened leaf tips. So this of course begs the question, why? Why are my plants struggling, particularly when most of these plants have been incredibly vigorous, very, very healthy, and problem-free for the entirety of their time in my collection? And the answer is, I have relocated to an environment with radically different water quality. Now, as I've mentioned many times before, San Francisco is notorious for its soft tap water. In fact, straight out the tap, my average TDS is around 6. This is quite different from when I lived in Colorado and had an average TDS of around 150 to 200. And even more different than the TDS from Los Angeles, which is notoriously hard and averaged around 400 or above. Now, I recognize how bizarre it must sound that my higher quality and cleaner water in San Francisco has actually created obstacles for my plants. But hear me out. They are not getting a whole lot of mineral content from their tap water exposure. In fact, they're getting practically none. And those nutrients that were previously represented in Los Angeles and Colorado really served these plants well. Now, I was a little confused about this at first because I have been using a complete orchid fertilizer for quite some time. More specifically, I've been using the Dynagrow Orchid Pro. And what I like about this is it has all essential trace elements, all of the macro and micronutrients that an orchid needs. But it never claimed to provide them in the quantities that they need them. So if we go in closer to this bottle, let's take a look at percentages. Yes, all of the essential nutrients are represented here, but when we look at calcium and magnesium, they're at a relatively low quantity, 2% and 0.5%. After doing a fair amount of research, what I realized is that many complete orchid fertilizers have relatively low quantities of calcium and magnesium because they are accounting for the mineral content that stands to be added from the tap water. So this is a prime example. While I have been giving my plants these essential nutrients, I have not been giving them enough. And because of my recent move to San Francisco, all of the plants are beginning to reflect that deficiency. Now, without making things too complicated, I do want to briefly discuss the difference between mobile nutrients and immobile nutrients. Now, mobile nutrients are nutrients that can be translocated within the plant to support new growth or flower spikes. And those are things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. They can be redirected within the plant from old growths to support new growth. Then there are things called immobile nutrients, things like calcium and iron. And those cannot be translocated within the plant, which is why you will start to see blackening of new growths. So when I tell you those two things, what do you think is happening here? Well, I think it's pretty evident that there is a calcium deficiency because all of the new growths are starting to blacken. But there is also the compound issue of magnesium deficiency, as is evident in a lot of the old growths and their mottling leaves. Now, this is not particularly surprising. As Rick L would highlight, magnesium and calcium deficiency often come hand in hand. So I'm seeing the negative impact of both here. So what now? Well, I think it's evident that I need to be supplementing my nutrient solution with additional calcium and magnesium. But before we even get there, it's important to first verify the pH of your water. Now, this is not a pH video. I will link my little trilogy of pH, water quality, and TDS below for your reference. But it's imperative that you verify that your pH is in the optimal range because you can be giving this plant all of the nutrients it ever desired or dreamed of. But if if your water is not in the optimal pH range, none of those passengers are going to arrive at their destination. So it's really important that you verify that your pH is in that sweet spot. So I keep mine around like 5.6, 5.75-ish, it varies. But once you've verified that, then it's time to start supplementing with the appropriate micronutrients. So what I did is I purchased this General Hydroponics calcium magnesium supplement. And when we look at the percentages represented, you can see how much higher it is than in my Dynagrow. You've got 5% calcium and 1.5% water-soluble magnesium. Full transparency, I'm not quite sure how much supplementation is going to be required to begin to remedy this issue. And that's going to be a learning process. You know, it's going to be, as always, a system of trial and error, because when I look at the literature that exists on the subject, there's a lot of conflicting messaging. A lot of people say that these plants can take a lot of calcium and magnesium. A lot of people say that that can be really destructive if there's too much represented in the grow container. So I'm just gonna feel it out. I'm gonna start off by fertilizing as recommended and then see how things really progress. And I'm also curious to see if one issue resolves faster than the other. Again, you know, I'm curious to see if just having magnesium in the equation is going to correct this. I don't know if they can recover or if these leaves are just kind of shot for good. But I'm curious to see if, I see that the calcium content can support new tissue growth. It'll be really peculiar to see how this evolves over time. So you'll have to forgive me for not being more certain about how things are going to play out or giving you more concrete insights. But as with everything on this channel, I'm just documenting a moment in time. This is a new struggle that I am tending to in new ways. And while I am not excited that this is happening at all, I am grateful to have had the opportunity to grow in such radically different grow environments with such radically different challenges, because I feel like I am beginning to paint a much more complete picture of these plants and how they need to be cared for, not just in San Francisco, but really anywhere. So who would have thought that having better water quality would yield such an issue, but just another piece of the puzzle here. Now, I will, of course, keep you updated in the monthly orchid collection updates on how things progress. I'm so curious to see how quickly or slowly this resolves, if it resolves at all. But I will likely do a full wrap-up video once I've gleaned sufficient insight to really coach you more effectively on this, when I have some, personal experience with the quantities that I've been using and how that impacted their development and growth. So I look forward to seeing how this evolves. I look forward to the lessons that stand to be learned. But I also want to ask if you have any best practices or observations regarding calcium and magnesium or any other nutrients really, how you incorporate it in, the quantities with which you incorporate it in, unique challenges that you might face because of your water quality and your environment. I would love to hear all of that. So thank you so much, as always, for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comment section because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and to have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye, friends.